My sister Olivia twirled around her new Mercedes convertible, a graduation gift from our parents worth more than everything I owned combined. Meanwhile, I was still paying off student loans from the same university she attended, working 2 jobs, just to afford my tiny one-bedroom apartment in the unfashionable part of Chicago. The golden child and the afterthought, our family's unspoken hierarchy had never been more obvious. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What do you think? My father called out, beaming with pride as he handed Olivia the keys. Only the best for our little genius. 4 years of straight A's deserve something special. I forced a smile, clutching the handmade card I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing after my late shift at the diner. Inside was a heartfelt message and a gift card for $50 to her favorite coffee shop. It had been all I could afford after paying this month's electric bill. It's amazing, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Congratulations on graduating, Liv. My mother waved me over for the family photo, positioning me on the edge where I could easily be cropped out later. Rebecca, couldn't you have worn something a bit nicer? This is a special occasion. I glanced down at my plain blue dress, the only nice outfit I owned that wasn't part of my waitress or bookstore uniforms. At 34, I had a master's degree in education, but could only find work as a substitute teacher, supplementing my income with service jobs to stay afloat. Sorry, Mom. I came straight from work, I explained, though we all knew it wouldn't have mattered what I wore. In my parents' eyes, I would never shine as brightly as Olivia, their 25-year-old prodigy who'd just completed her MBA and already had 3 job offers from prestigious firms. Well, at least try to smile properly for the photo, my mother sighed, adjusting her designer sunglasses. Richard, take a few so we have options for the holiday card. My father nodded, always eager to document Olivia's achievements. My college graduation 9 years earlier had merited exactly 3 photos, taken by a friend because my parents had been busy helping Olivia prepare for a high school debate championship. As I stood there, forcing a smile for the camera, my mind drifted back to all the milestones in my life that had been overshadowed by Olivia's achievements. My acceptance to Northwestern University had been celebrated with a quick dinner at a local restaurant, while Olivia's acceptance to the same school 4 years later had warranted a weekend getaway to New York. My first teaching job, a 1-year substitute position, had earned a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear," from my father, who was too busy planning Olivia's sweet 16 party to hear the details. "Perfect," my father announced, reviewing the photos. "These will look great in the graduation announcement." "We're taking Olivia to Castellani's tonight to celebrate," my mother announced, slipping her phone into her designer purse. "You're welcome to join us, Rebecca, if you don't have to work." But I did have to work. The night shift at Margot's Diner started at 7 p.m., and I couldn't afford to call out. Not when rent was due next week, and my landlord had already hinted about raising it again. "I have a shift," I said simply. "Again?" Olivia frowned, her perfect features creasing in what might have been actual concern or just well-practiced sympathy. "You work too hard, Becca. You should let Mom and Dad help you find something better. Help me the way they'd helped her, with connections, recommendations, and the financial freedom to take unpaid internships that led to dream jobs. The way they'd helped her with down payments and co-signed loans and surprise gifts like luxury cars." "I'm fine," I replied, the response so automatic it had lost all meaning. The diner's flexible with my substitute teaching schedule. My mother's lips thinned. "If you'd gone to business school like we suggested instead of pursuing education, you might have more stability." There it was, the familiar refrain. My choices were always wrong in their eyes, always the reason for my struggles. Never mind that teaching had been my passion since I was 12. Never mind that I'd worked through college and graduate school, earning scholarships they rarely acknowledged. Never mind that I volunteered at a literacy center on weekends, helping Adults learn to read, finding purpose in work that would never make me rich. The world needs teachers, Mom, I said quietly. The world needs successful people who can take care of themselves, she replied, checking her watch. We should get going. If we want to make our reservation, will you be at Sunday dinner this weekend, Rebecca? I nodded, though I knew exactly how it would go. 3 hours of listening to Olivia's latest achievements, my mother's not-so-subtle suggestions about my life choices, and my father's distracted half-attention as he checked work emails between courses. Wouldn't miss it, I said, handing Olivia her card. Congratulations again. She hugged me, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering after she pulled away. Thanks, Becca. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Maybe we can do lunch before I fly out. To interview in New York. I knew she wouldn't call. She never did. But I nodded and waved as they all piled into my father's Range Rover, leaving me alone in the parking lot of my apartment building. The Mercedes gleamed in the afternoon sun, a perfect symbol of everything I'd never be given. Inside my small apartment, I changed into my diner uniform, black pants with a coffee stain I couldn't quite remove, and a blue polo with the Margot's logo. The space was clean but sparse, decorated with second-hand furniture and the few pieces of art I'd collected over the years. A bookshelf overflowed with novels and teaching materials, the one luxury I allowed myself. On my refrigerator hung a child's drawing, a stick figure with red curly hair like mine, holding what looked like a book. Ms. Chen is the best teacher, was scrawled across the top in uneven letters. These small victories kept me going on days when my family's indifference cut too deep. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Don't forget to bring that casserole. Dish you borrowed last month to Sunday dinner. And wear something nice. The Hendersons might stop by, and their son Jason is recently divorced. I set my phone down without replying. At 34, I was still being set up with suitable men by my mother, who saw my single status as yet another failure to add to my collection. Never mind that Jason Henderson had been arrogant and condescending when we'd met at a previous family gathering, looking at me with pity when he learned I was just a substitute teacher. As I grabbed my keys and purse, I passed the small desk, where I'd been working on applications for permanent teaching positions. 23 applications sent out so far, 3 interviews, no offers. But I refused to give up. Unlike my parents, I believed education was a calling, not just a paycheck. The irony wasn't lost on me, spending my days teaching other people's children when my own parents had never really seen me. Not my struggles, not my small victories, not the person I'd become despite rather than because of them. I locked my apartment door behind me and headed for my 12-year-old Honda with the check engine light that had been on for months. Another shift, another day. The same routine that had defined my life while Olivia continued to soar. What I didn't know then was that in exactly 72 hours, everything would change. The convenience store where I stopped for cheap coffee, before my shifts would sell me a lottery ticket that would rewrite our family's entire dynamic. But on that warm June afternoon, I was just Rebecca Chen, the forgotten daughter, the family afterthought, heading to work while my sister's new Mercedes gleamed in the sun. The fluorescent lights of Margot's diner buzzed overhead as I refilled coffee cups for the late-night regulars. The place wasn't fancy, vinyl booths worn thin in spots, laminated menus with faded photos, and a jukebox that only played songs from before I was born. But there was an honesty to it that I appreciated after the carefully curated perfection of my parents' world. You're a lifesaver, Rebecca, said Earl, a retired mechanic who came in every night for pie and coffee. He was 83 and had been a widower for 12 years. How's the teaching going? Unlike my family, Earl actually remembered what I did during the day. He asked about my students and listened to my stories. Sometimes he'd share memories of his wife, who had been a high school English teacher for 40 years. Spring semester. Just ended, I told him, topping off his mug with decaf. I'm hoping to pick up summer school classes, but nothing's confirmed yet. They'd be lucky to have you, Earl said with certainty that warmed something inside me. My Margaret always said you could tell a real teacher by how they talk about their students, with respect, not complaint. From the other end of the counter, Margot herself called out, "Rebecca, order up for table 7. Margot was in her 60s, with dyed red hair and reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She'd opened the diner 30 years ago after her husband left her with 2 young kids and no support. Now her children were grown. One a doctor, one an engineer, and she ran the place with the precision of a field general. I grabbed the plates, a Denver omelet and a stack of blueberry pancakes, and delivered them to a young couple who looked exhausted but happy. They had a sleeping toddler in a carrier beside them. "Date night?" I asked with a smile as I set down their food. The woman laughed softly. "First one in 6 months. My mother finally agreed to watch the baby, but he refused to stay with her. So, fancy dinner for 3 at midnight." "Sometimes the best plans are the ones that don't go as planned," I said, arranging their silverware. They thanked me and dug in, taking turns cutting their food one-handed while the other kept a gentle hand on the carrier. I watched them for a moment, the tenderness in their interactions, the way they made this middle-of-the-night meal at a diner seem special. It reminded me that family could look different than the version I'd grown up with. My shift ended at 2 a.m., and I drove home through empty streets. The city felt peaceful at this hour, like it was holding its breath. My apartment was dark and quiet when I let myself in, but it didn't feel empty to me. The bookshelves were filled with stories I loved, the walls decorated with art I'd chosen. Unlike my parents' house with its designer furniture and strategic displays of family photos, mostly featuring Olivia, every item in my space had meaning. I showered and changed into my pajamas, then curled up in my reading chair by the window. Despite the late hour, I wasn't ready to sleep. Instead, I pulled out the manuscript I'd been working on for the past year. A children's book about a girl who discovers a hidden library where books come to life at night. Writing had always been my secret escape, even as a child. When Olivia was getting applause for piano recitals or science fair projects, I'd been filling notebooks with stories. My parents had never understood this passion, seeing it as another impractical pursuit. "Hobbies are fine, Rebecca," my mother had said once, "but they don't pay the bills." I ran my fingers over the illustrations I'd drawn, simple but expressive pictures that would probably never see publication. Still, creating them brought me joy. In the quiet hours between my jobs, I built worlds where overlooked children became heroes, where ordinary people discovered their own magic. My phone buzzed with a text message, surprising me at such a late hour. It was from Olivia. "Still up? I saved you a slice of chocolate mousse cake from dinner. It was amazing. I'll bring it Sunday unless you want to meet for coffee tomorrow. I need your advice on something." I stared at the message, trying to decipher what was behind it. Olivia rarely sought me out unless she needed something. Help with a gift for our parents, someone to listen to her practice a presentation, or occasionally, a loan she never remembered to repay. Yet there was a part of me that always hoped for a real connection with my sister, some recognition that we shared more than just parents and childhood memories. "I work tomorrow, but I have a break from 2-3. Coffee at Groundwork near the diner?" I texted back. Her response came quickly. "Perfect. See you then, and thanks, Becca. You're the best." I set my phone down, not sure what to make of this unexpected outreach. Despite everything, despite the years of being the afterthought, I still loved my sister. I could see how our parents' favoritism had shaped her too, making her entitled in some ways, but also burdening her with impossible expectations. In their eyes, Olivia could never fail, which was its own kind of prison. Morning came too soon. I made myself a quick breakfast and scrolled through job listings on my laptop, applying for 2 more permanent teaching positions before heading out. The day was bright and warm, Chicago showing off its best summer self after a brutal winter. My morning routine included a stop at Sam's Corner store for coffee. At $1.75 for a large cup, it was one of the few luxuries I allowed myself daily. Sam, the owner, was behind the counter as always, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed. "Morning, Rebecca," he called as I entered. "How's my favorite teacher today?" "Just a substitute," I reminded him, though I appreciated the title. Sam waved, away the distinction. "Anyone who teaches kids to read is a real teacher in my book. The usual?" I nodded, reaching for my wallet. The morning news played on a small TV behind the counter, the anchors discussing some record-breaking lottery jackpot. I rarely paid attention to such things. Dreams of sudden wealth seemed as realistic to me as growing wings. "That'll be $1.75, Sam said, then paused. "You know what? It's on the house today." "Sam, you can't keep giving me free coffee. You have a business to run." He shrugged. "Consider it thanks for helping Maya with her college application essays. She got her acceptance letter yesterday, full scholarship to Illinois State." I felt a surge of pride. Sam's granddaughter Maya had been struggling with those essays, convinced she had nothing meaningful to say. We'd spent several evenings at a back table in the store, mining her experiences for the stories that made her unique. "That's wonderful news. Maya did all the hard work, though," she says different. Sam handed me my coffee. "Hey, you should get a lottery ticket. Jackpot's up to $212 million now. Someone's gotta win." I laughed. "I think I'll save my $2. "Come on," he insisted. "Live a little. If you won, what's the first thing you'd do?" The question caught me off guard. What would I do with that kind of money? Not buy a mansion or a sports car. Not quit working entirely. I loved teaching too much. "I'd start a literacy foundation," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the answer came. "Create free libraries and reading programs in underserved neighborhoods. Maybe open a bookstore with a classroom in the back for tutoring." Sam's eyes crinkled at the corners. "See? That right there is why you deserve to win. Here." He tore off a lottery ticket from the roll and handed it to me. "This one's on me, too." Sam. "Humor an old man, Rebecca." I accepted the ticket with a smile and tucked it into my wallet, beside the $20 bill I was carefully saving for emergency gas money. "Thank you. Just promise you'll remember us little people when you're rich and famous," he joked. "You'll be the first call I make," I promised, never imagining I would actually need to keep that promise. The morning passed in a blur of 6th grade math classes. I was filling in for a teacher on maternity leave at Westside Middle School, trying to keep 30 preteens focused on fractions when all they could think about was the approaching summer vacation. By the time my lunch break arrived, I was exhausted, but satisfied. 2 students who had been struggling had finally had breakthrough moments, their faces lighting up with understanding. I checked my phone between classes and found 3 missed calls from my mother and a text message that simply read, "Call me as soon as possible. It's about Sunday dinner." Sighing, I ducked into the empty teacher's lounge and returned her call. "Rebecca, finally," my mother answered on the first ring. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." "I was teaching, Mom," I reminded her. "What's going on?" "We need to move Sunday dinner to Saturday. Your father has a golf meeting with potential investors on Sunday, and we can't reschedule. I need you to bring your spinach dip instead of the casserole dish. And the Hendersons are definitely coming. Jason just finalized his divorce last month. No, how are you, or how's your day going? No acknowledgement that changing plans last minute might affect my schedule. Just the expectation that I would rearrange my life to accommodate them, as always. "I work Saturday night," I said. "Can't you call in sick?" "This is important, Rebecca. The Hendersons' shipping business just expanded to international markets, and Jason is taking over the European division. He's going to be extremely successful. Translation: he's a much better prospect than you deserve, so make it work." "I'm sorry, but I can't afford to lose the shift. I'm already picking up extra hours to cover next month's car insurance payment. A payment that had increased after I'd been rear-ended at a stoplight. An accident that wasn't my fault, but that my parents had somehow made about my poor life choices. My mother's sigh crackled through the phone. This is exactly why we worry about you. 34 years old and still living paycheck to paycheck. Olivia is already contributing to her retirement account, and her company matches up to 6%. I bit back the response that rose to my lips, that Olivia had never had to pay her own way through college, that her first job had come through Dad's business connections, that her apartment down payment had been a generous loan from our parents that we all knew would never be repaid. Instead, I said, I'll try to stop by before my shift starts, but I can't promise anything. Another call was trying to come through. The school office, probably looking for me to cover another class during my planning period. Extra work meant extra money, and I couldn't afford to turn it down. I have to go, Mom. I'll text you later. About Saturday. I hung up without waiting for her response and answered the other call, pushing thoughts of family dinner and Jason Henderson from my mind. Whatever came of this weekend, I knew one thing for certain. It would be just another reminder of the daughter I would never be, the life I would never have, at least in my parents' eyes. What I couldn't have known then was that the universe was about to call their bluff in the most unexpected way possible. Groundwork Coffee was bustling when I arrived at 2:05 p.m. I spotted Olivia immediately. She was impossible to miss, her designer clothes and perfect blowout making her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread rather than a business meeting. She was already at a table by the window, 2 cups in front of her, scrolling through her phone with manicured fingers. "Sorry I'm late," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. The substitute coordinator called with a last-minute assignment for tomorrow. "No problem," Olivia smiled, pushing one of the cups toward me. "I got you a vanilla latte. That's still your favorite, right?" I nodded, surprised she remembered. The latte would have cost nearly $6, almost as much as I'd budgeted for dinner that night, but it would be ungracious to mention that. "Thanks for meeting me," she continued, setting her phone face down on the table. "I know you're busy with everything." The slight pause told me all I needed to know about how she viewed my multiple jobs, not as hard work or necessity, but as a chaotic life choice she couldn't quite comprehend. "What did you want to talk about?" I asked, taking a sip of the latte. It was delicious, I had to admit. A small luxury that reminded me of all the little things I routinely denied myself to make rent. Olivia leaned forward, excitement lighting her features. "So, I got offers from all 3 firms I interviewed with. Foster & Mills is offering the highest salary, but Apex Global has better advancement opportunities, and TechVance is smaller, but would let me lead my own department right away." "That's amazing, Liv," I said, genuinely happy for her despite the familiar twinge of comparison. "You must be thrilled." "I am, but I'm also stressed about making the right choice. Mom and Dad are pushing for Foster & Mills because of the prestige factor, but I'm not sure it's the best fit." She sighed, running a finger around the rim of her cup. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. You're the only one who doesn't have an agenda for my life." The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being the family disappointment, I was now the one person Olivia could turn to for unbiased advice. "Which company excites you the most when you think about the actual work?" I asked. She seemed startled by the question. "The work? I mean, they're all in corporate finance, so the work is pretty similar. But there must be differences in company culture, in their values, in what they prioritize." "I guess," she said slowly. "TechVance does a lot of work with sustainable businesses, which is interesting. And they have this mentorship program for girls in STEM that all executives are expected to participate in." I nodded. "That sounds meaningful." "It is. But Foster & Mills pays almost $30,000 more per year to start. And what would you do with that extra money?" Olivia blinked at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Are you struggling financially now? Would that additional money fundamentally change something important in your life? Or would it just mean a bigger apartment? More expensive vacations? Nicer clothes? She stared at me, then let out a surprised laugh. God, Becca, only you would question whether more money is better. That's why I needed to talk to you. Everyone else in my life is so fixated on status and appearances. The lack of self-awareness was stunning. Olivia had been pursuing status and appearances her entire life. Or rather, our parents had been pursuing them through her, and she'd happily complied. I'm just suggesting that there are other factors to consider beyond salary, I said carefully. Like whether you'll feel good about the work you're doing, whether you'll be proud to tell people where you work and why. She was quiet for a moment, stirring her drink thoughtfully. TechVance's CEO is a woman, she said finally. She started the company after being passed over for promotion at her previous firm, built it from nothing to a $4 billion valuation in 8 years. There was admiration in her voice I rarely heard when she talked about career paths. Sounds like you already know which offer you want to take, I said gently. Olivia sighed. But Mom and Dad will be so disappointed if I don't go with Foster & Mills. Dad already told his golf buddies I'd be working there. It's your life, Liv. Not theirs. Easy for you to say, she shot back, a flash of the old Olivia emerging. You've never cared what they think. I felt a flare of anger. That's not true. I've always cared. Too much, probably. The difference is that I stopped expecting their approval when it became clear I was never going to get it. Olivia's expression shifted, something like guilt crossing her perfect features. Becca, that's not fair. They're proud of you too in their way. In what way exactly? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. When was the last time they bragged about me to their friends? When was the last time they remembered what grade I teach or asked about my writing? You're still writing. Those children's stories? She sounded genuinely surprised, which only proved my point. Yes, Olivia. I've completed 3 manuscripts and illustrated them myself. That's nice. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, clearly uncomfortable. With the turn in conversation, have you tried to publish them? Publishing requires an agent. Agents require connections or money for conferences where you can pitch to them. I have neither. I'm sure Mom and Dad would help if you asked. I nearly laughed. The last time I mentioned my writing to Mom, she suggested I focus on getting settled first. And Dad changed the subject to your promotion. Olivia had the grace to look embarrassed. They just worry about you. No, they judge me. There's a difference. A tense silence fell between us. I regretted my honesty almost immediately. This was why our rare one-on-one conversations never went well. The weight of unspoken resentments and fundamental differences in how we viewed the world always crushed any chance of real connection. I'm sorry, I said finally. That was unfair. I'm genuinely happy for your success, Liv. And for what it's worth, I think you should take the TechVance position if that's what excites you. Money comes and goes, but feeling good about how you spend your days, that's worth more than a higher salary. She studied me for a moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. How do you do it, Becca? Do what? Stay so, I don't know, centered? You work multiple jobs, live in that tiny apartment, drive that old car, and yet you never seem bitter or resentful. I nearly choked on my latte. If only she knew the bitterness I sometimes felt watching her life of ease and opportunity. Opportunities I'd never been given. But there was a deeper truth beneath that momentary resentment. I've built a life I can be proud of, I said. It's not the life Mom and Dad wanted for me, and it's not easy, but it's mine. I help kids learn to read and think critically. I take care of elderly regulars at the diner who have no family to check on them. I write stories that might never be published but bring me joy to create. None of that shows up on a bank statement, but it matters. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. "I envy that," she finally said, so softly I almost didn't hear her. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just checking boxes on a list someone else wrote for. My life." The vulnerability in her admission caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I saw past the golden child to the sister who was, in her own way, as trapped by our parents' expectations as I had been liberated by their dismissal of me. "It's not too late to write your own list," I said. She gave me a half smile. "Maybe that's what the Tech Vance offer is. My first item on my own list." "Maybe it is." Olivia glanced at her watch, a Cartier our parents had given her for her 25th birthday. My 25th birthday gift had been a check for $100 and a reminder that I should be saving for retirement. I should get going. I have a call with the Foster & Mills HR director at 3. She hesitated, then added, "But I'm going to ask some harder questions about their company culture. Good for you." We stood up and Olivia surprised me by pulling me into a hug. "Thanks, Becca, for always being straight with me." "Anytime. Oh, and about Saturday dinner, I'll back you up if you can't make it." Mom's being ridiculous about the whole Jason Henderson thing anyway. The guy is a complete bore. I smiled. "Thanks. I appreciate that." As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Olivia called after me. "Don't forget I still owe you that chocolate. Mousse cake." "I won't," I promised, though we both knew the cake would likely be forgotten, like most of Olivia's well-intentioned gestures. I walked back to the school for my afternoon classes, mulling over our conversation. There had been a moment, just a moment, of real connection between us. A glimpse of what our relationship might have been without our parents' constant comparisons and clear favoritism. Too bad it had taken nearly 20 years to get here, and even now, it was just a moment, not a fundamental change. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Olivia just called. She's considering turning down Foster & Mills for some startup no one's heard of. Did you talk her out of Foster & Mills?" Richard is livid. And just like that, I was back to being the bad influence, the daughter who couldn't even be trusted to give her sister proper advice. I turned my phone off without responding and slipped it into my pocket. Some battles weren't worth fighting. The rest of the day passed in a blur of mathematics and preteen drama. By the time I arrived at the diner for my evening shift, I was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. The weight of being the family disappointment, of never measuring up no matter how hard I worked, felt especially heavy after my conversation with Olivia. "You look like you could use this," Margot said, sliding a plate with a slice of apple pie toward me as I tied on my apron. "On the house." "That obvious, huh?" "I've been serving food to the heartbroken and weary for 30 years, honey. I know the look." She patted my hand. "Eat. Sugar helps, at least temporarily." I took a grateful bite of the pie. "Family stuff," I explained between mouthfuls. "Ah," Margot nodded sagely. "The people who know exactly how to hurt us because they installed all our buttons." That made me smile despite myself. "Exactly. Well, you've got a different kind of family here too," she reminded me, gesturing around the diner. "One that appreciates you just as you are." She was right. Earl was already at his usual spot at the counter, beaming when he saw me. The young couple from the night before had returned, this time without their toddler, holding hands across the table in a rare moment of freedom. The evening cook, Luis, called a greeting from the kitchen window, asking about my students. This was a different kind of wealth. Being known, being valued, being seen. I tucked the lottery ticket Sam had given me deeper into my wallet, forgotten in the day's events. Little did I know that those random numbers were about to change everything, not just my bank account, but the careful balance of power and perception in my family that had defined my entire life. 3 days later, I stumbled into Sam's Corner, store at 6:15 a.m., bleary-eyed and desperately in need of coffee. I'd been up half the night grading final papers for a high school English class I was covering. The regular teacher wanted the grades before she returned from medical leave, which meant I'd spent hours evaluating essays on The Great Gatsby until my eyes burned. "You look like you could use a double shot today," Sam greeted me from behind the counter. "Make it a triple," I joked weakly. "Any chance you've invented coffee in IV form?" Sam chuckled, already preparing my usual. "Rough night?" 32 essays on the American dream and symbolic color use. Some were brilliant, some were less so. "The joys of education," he said, sliding my coffee across the counter. As I reached for my wallet, he asked, "Did you check your ticket yet?" I blinked at him, confused. "Ticket?" "The lottery ticket I gave you. The drawing was last night. Nobody's claimed the jackpot yet, which means either someone doesn't know they won, or the ticket was sold in another state." He pointed to a small TV in the corner playing the morning news. "They announced it was purchased right here in Chicago." The memory of the ticket came flooding back. "Oh, right. No, I haven't checked it." I dug through my wallet and found the crumpled ticket tucked behind my library card. I honestly forgot about it. Sam gestured to a scanner next to the register. "Check it now. You never know." To humor him, I smoothed out the ticket and held it under the scanner. A mechanical beep sounded, and a message flashed on the small screen. "Congratulations, you are a winner. Contact Illinois lottery officials to claim your prize." I stared at the message, certain there was some mistake. "Is this thing broken?" Sam leaned over to look, his eyes widening. "Holy mother of—" He grabbed my arm. "Rebecca, I think you just won something big." "Probably $5, I said, unable to process any other possibility. Sam was already pulling up the lottery website on his phone. "What are your numbers?" I read them off the ticket. 7, 12, 24, 36, 48, 53. Sam's face went pale. He turned, his phone to show me the screen. The winning numbers for the $212 million jackpot matched mine. Every single one. "That's not possible," I whispered. "Check the ticket again," Sam urged, his voice shaking with excitement. I did. The numbers stared back at me. Innocuous little digits that had just rewritten my future. 7, 12, 24, 36, 48, 53. "Rebecca," Sam said, reaching across the counter to steady me as I swayed slightly. "You just won $212 million. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I clutched the counter, my coffee forgotten. "What do I do?" Sam flipped the open sign to closed and locked the front door. "First, sign that ticket right now. Then we call my nephew Michael. He's an attorney who specializes in estate planning and financial matters." With trembling fingers, I signed the back of the ticket. My signature looked alien to me, like it belonged to a different Rebecca Chen. One whose life hadn't just been turned upside down by a random act of chance. "This can't be real," I kept saying, as Sam guided me to a chair in the back room of the store. "Things like this don't happen to people like me." "What kind of people do they happen to, then?" Sam asked gently, placing a glass of water in front. "Of me?" I didn't have an answer. In my experience, good fortune happened to people like Olivia, people who already seemed blessed by luck and circumstance. Not to substitute teachers who worked night shifts at diners and lived in apartments with unreliable heating. Sam called his nephew while I sat in stunned silence, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The ticket felt unnaturally heavy in my hand, as if the weight of all those millions was physically present in the small slip of paper. "Michael will meet us at his office in 30 minutes, Sam announced after finishing his call. He says, "Don't tell anyone else yet. Not family, not friends, no one." "I need to call in to work," I said, suddenly remembering I was supposed to be at school in less than an hour. "Tell them you're sick," Sam advised. "Food poisoning or something. This is more important." For the first time in my adult life, I called in sick to a job when I wasn't actually ill. The school secretary sounded concerned. I never missed work, even when I probably should have, but accepted my vague explanation without question. I felt a twinge of guilt thinking about the students who would have a different substitute today, one who wouldn't know where we'd left off in the curriculum. "Ready?" Sam asked, keys in hand. "I'll drive you to Michael's office." I followed him to his car in a daze. Chicago was waking up around us, people heading to work, children to school, the daily rhythm of the city continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for me, everything had changed in an instant. "What would you do with that kind of money, Sam?" I asked as we drove through the morning traffic. He considered the question seriously. "Pay off my granddaughter's college, set up funds for my great-grandkids, maybe expand the store a little." He glanced at me. "But most of it I'd give away. At my age, what do I need millions for? Better to see it do good while I'm still around to enjoy the view." It was exactly the kind of answer I'd expect from Sam. Practical, generous, focused on family. It reminded me of what I'd told him earlier in the week about my own dreams for a literacy foundation. "I meant what I said before," I told him. "About the libraries and reading programs." Sam nodded approvingly. "That's why the universe picked you to win, Rebecca. Some people get money and it ruins them. Others use it to make a difference." Michael's office was in a sleek downtown building, with a doorman and marble floors. It was the kind of place I usually felt out of place. But today, that feeling was amplified by the knowledge of what I carried in my purse. A piece of paper worth more money than I could comprehend. Michael Lopez was younger than I expected. Maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and a reassuring manner. He greeted his uncle warmly, then shook my hand. "Uncle Sam gave me a brief overview, but let's start from the beginning," he said, leading us into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "May I see the ticket?" I handed it over with reluctance. It felt dangerous. To let it out of my possession, even for a moment. Michael examined it carefully, then opened his laptop and verified the numbers against the official lottery website. "Ms. Chen, you are indeed holding the winning ticket for last night's jackpot," he confirmed. "Now, before we go any further, I want to explain a few things about what happens next, and some important decisions you'll need to make." For the next hour, Michael walked me through a crash course in sudden wealth management. The options for claiming the prize, lump sum versus annuity, the tax implications, the importance of setting up proper trusts and financial structures before claiming. He explained the pros and cons of remaining anonymous, which unfortunately wasn't possible in Illinois, and the timeline for when my name would become public. "The most important thing right now is discretion," Michael emphasized. "Once your name is released, you'll be inundated with requests for money, from family, friends, charities, investment opportunities, and scammers of all kinds." I thought of my parents and Olivia, imagining their reactions to this news. Would they be happy for me, or would they immediately see it as an opportunity to benefit themselves? "How long can I keep this quiet?" I asked. "You have 60 days to claim the ticket, and then your name becomes public record. I strongly recommend using that time to prepare, both financially and personally." "What do you mean by personally?" Michael's expression was sympathetic. "Sudden wealth changes relationships, Ms. Chen. People you've known your entire life will see you differently. Some will feel entitled to your money. Others will resent you for having it. You need to prepare yourself emotionally for those changes and decide in advance how you want to handle various scenarios." The thought was overwhelming. I'd never been good at confrontation, especially with my family. How would I handle my parents' inevitable expectations? How would this change things with Olivia? "I would recommend setting up a revocable living trust immediately," Michael continued. "We can establish clear guidelines for any gifts or loans you might want to provide to family members, which will help you maintain boundaries." Boundaries. The word resonated. For my entire life, I'd had no boundaries with my family. I'd been the reliable one, the one who showed up when asked, who never complained, who accepted the scraps of attention and approval thrown my way. This money would force a reckoning that was long overdue. I also suggest you consider resigning from your jobs and relocating temporarily, Michael added. Once the news breaks, reporters will be at your workplace and apartment. Having a secure location already established will make the transition easier. The idea of leaving my jobs was surprisingly difficult. Despite the low pay and lack of stability, I loved teaching. And the diner, with its community of regulars and the surrogate family I'd found there, meant more to me than just a paycheck. I can't just disappear, I said. There are people who depend on me. Michael nodded. I understand. But your life is about to change dramatically, whether you want it to or not. It's better to manage that change proactively than to be overwhelmed by it. Can I at least give notice? Finish out the school year? The school year ends in 2 weeks, correct? When I nodded, he continued. That should be fine. But I'd recommend being vague about your future plans. And for the diner, perhaps a shorter notice period would be prudent. By the end of our meeting, my head was spinning with new terminology and concepts. Blind trusts, charitable foundations, wealth management teams, security considerations. Michael promised to have preliminary paperwork ready for me to review the next day and recommended a financial advisor specializing in sudden wealth. Uncle Sam tells me you're interested in literacy programs, Michael said as our meeting wound down. Yes, I confirmed. I want to create free libraries and reading programs in underserved neighborhoods. Maybe start a scholarship for education students who commit to teaching in low-income schools. Michael smiled. Those are wonderful goals. We can set up a charitable foundation as part of your overall financial structure. It will provide tax benefits while allowing you to make a meaningful impact. As we left Michael's office, Sam squeezed my shoulder. You doing okay with all this, Rebecca? I took a deep breath. I think so. It's just a lot to process. Take it one step at a time, he advised. And remember, this money doesn't change who you are. It just gives you more options for what you can do. His words stayed with me as he drove me home. The money didn't change who I was, but would it change how others saw me? Would my parents suddenly find me worthy of their approval now that I had financial success, even if it came through luck rather than the conventional path they'd always valued? My apartment felt different when I returned. Smaller somehow, more temporary. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine living somewhere else. Not a mansion or anything ostentatious, but perhaps a house with a yard. A dedicated writing space. Bookshelves built into the walls. I sat at my small desk and made a list of immediate actions. Meet with Michael tomorrow to review paperwork. Give notice at the diner, but not yet. Finish the school year 4. Look for a new place to live 5. Tell no one about the win until absolutely necessary. The last item gave me pause. Saturday dinner with my family was tomorrow night. Could I sit across from them, listen to their subtle digs about my life choices, and keep this enormous secret? The thought was both terrifying and strangely empowering. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Just letting you know, Mom's been calling everyone. Jason Henderson is definitely coming tomorrow. Wear something appropriate. Her words, not mine. Sorry. I stared at the message, thinking about how different this dinner would be if they knew what had happened today. How my parents would suddenly find me fascinating, worthy of their attention. How Jason Henderson would no longer look at me with pity. I texted back. Thanks for the warning. I'll be there. For the first time in my life, I would attend a family dinner knowing something they didn't. That in a matter of weeks, the family dynamic they'd established over decades would be completely upended. Not because I'd finally done something they valued, but because of random chance. Because Sam had insisted on giving me a lottery ticket I hadn't even wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to check that the ticket was still in the locked box I'd kept important documents in since college. Each time I'd unfold it carefully, verify the numbers, then secure it again. $212 million. After taxes, and taking the lump sum, Michael had estimated I'd receive around $90 million as more money than I could spend in a lifetime. More than enough to fund every dream I'd ever deferred, every goal I'd thought beyond my reach. But as I finally drifted off near dawn, it wasn't the money I was thinking about. It was the look on my parents' faces when they realized that the daughter they'd dismissed for decades had suddenly become someone they couldn't ignore. Would the money finally make me visible to them? And more importantly, did I even want it to? The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Margot from the diner. "Rebecca, are you feeling any better? I was wondering if you could come in this afternoon." Tina called out sick, and we're short-staffed. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I'd planned to use the day to meet with Michael again and start researching potential places to live. "I'm sorry, Margot, but I still don't think I should be around food." I lied, hating myself for it. "Some kind of stomach bug." "Of course, honey, take care of yourself. We'll manage somehow." The concern in her voice made me feel even worse. Margot had always been good to me, flexible with my teaching schedule, understanding when I needed time off for interviews, generous with leftover food she knew I could use, and soon I'd be leaving the diner for good. The thought brought an unexpected wave of sadness. After hanging up, I forced myself to eat some toast and check my email. Michael had sent over preliminary documents for me to review before our afternoon meeting, along with links to several articles about lottery winners, both success stories and cautionary tales. I spent the morning reading about people whose lives had been ruined by sudden wealth, family estrangements, substance abuse, bankruptcy, even murder. But I also read about winners who had used their fortunes to create meaningful change in their communities, who had maintained healthy relationships and found purpose beyond spending their millions. The difference seemed to lie in how they approached their winnings, whether they saw the money as an end in itself or as a tool for something greater. At noon, I received a text from my mother. "Don't forget dinner is at 7 sharp tonight. Please make an effort with your appearance. The Hendersons are very particular." I sent back a simple, "I'll be there." My meeting with Michael was scheduled for 2 p.m., which gave me time to shower and change into something slightly more professional than my usual t-shirt and jeans. As I got ready, I found myself studying my reflection with new eyes. Would people treat me differently when they knew I was worth millions? Would I be seen as more attractive, more interesting, more worthy of attention? The thought was both disturbing and fascinating. Michael's office was just as impressive in daylight. This time, he had assembled a small team, a financial advisor, named Elaine Woodhouse, and a security consultant, David Mercer. "Before we begin," Michael said after introductions were complete, "I want to emphasize that everything we discuss today is about setting up structures that protect you and allow you to use your windfall in ways that align with your values. There's no single right way to handle this kind of wealth." Elaine nodded in agreement. Too often, new wealth holders rush into decisions they later regret: large purchases, investments they don't understand, commitments to family and friends that become unsustainable. Our goal is to help you avoid those pitfalls. For the next 2 hours, we discussed the mechanics of claiming the jackpot, setting up the proper financial structures, and preliminary security considerations. David recommended changes to my daily routines, suggested I update all my passwords and consider using a P.O. box for mail, and strongly advised against posting anything on social media that might reveal my future whereabouts. The greatest threat to lottery winners isn't typically strangers, David explained. It's people they know, distant relatives, former classmates, colleagues, who believe they're entitled to a share. And how do I handle those requests? I asked. Ideally, you don't, David said. You establish a buffer, a lawyer, a financial advisor, or a family office that handles all requests for money. You never make cash gifts directly. I thought about my parents, about Olivia. Would they expect handouts? Would they be angry if I refused? As the meeting concluded, Michael walked me out. I know this is overwhelming, he said kindly. Most of us have fantasized about winning the lottery, but the reality is much more complex than the dream. I keep thinking I'll wake up and discover this was all a mistake, I admitted. That's normal. But this is very real, and you need to be prepared. He hesitated, then added, If I may offer some personal advice? I nodded. Find someone you trust completely, someone with no financial stake in your decisions, to talk to about this. The isolation that comes with sudden wealth can be one of the hardest parts to navigate. I don't know if I have anyone like that, I said, realizing as the words left my mouth how sad they sounded. Michael suggested a therapist who specialized in wealth psychology, promising to send her information. As I left his office, I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me. I needed to talk to someone who knew me, really knew me, before I became Rebecca Chen lottery winner. Almost without conscious decision, I found myself driving to Lakeside Retirement Community, where my former professor and mentor, Dr. Eleanor Walsh, now lived. Eleanor had been my advisor in college, the person who had encouraged my writing when everyone else dismissed it as a hobby. She'd kept in touch over the years, always checking in on my latest work, meeting for coffee when her health permitted. At 82, Eleanor had scaled back her activities, but not her sharp mind or direct manner of speaking. She greeted me with surprise but obvious pleasure when I appeared at her door. Rebecca, what a lovely unexpected visit. Come in, come in. Her apartment was small but filled with books, floor-to-ceiling shelves in every room, tables stacked. With reading material, notes and papers organized in mysterious systems only she understood. Tea? She offered, already moving toward the kitchen. Let me, I insisted, knowing her arthritis made carrying the kettle difficult. As I prepared the tea, Eleanor settled into her favorite armchair by the window. Now, what brings you here on a Saturday? Shouldn't you be teaching or waiting tables or whatever other jobs they're underpaying you for these days? I smiled at her familiar bluntness. I have the day off, and I needed some advice from someone wise. Flattery. Interesting. Opening strategy. Her eyes twinkled. Must be serious. I took a deep breath. Eleanor, what I'm about to tell you has to remain completely confidential. I haven't told anyone else except the lawyers and financial advisors I met with yesterday and today. She straightened, her expression becoming serious. Of course. I won the lottery, the big one, $212 million. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up, but otherwise she remained remarkably composed. Well, that is significant news. I laughed, despite myself. Only Eleanor would respond to a life-changing lottery win with such measured understatement. When did this happen? She asked. Yesterday morning. I didn't even buy the ticket. Sam from the corner store gave it to me. I explained the whole situation, including Michael's advice and my concerns about how my family would react. Eleanor listened without interruption, her fingers steepled under her chin. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know, she said finally, I've often thought lottery winnings were wasted on the wrong people. What do you mean? Most winners see the money as an end in itself, a way to buy things, to elevate their status, to indulge desires they've suppressed. But money, especially that much money, is better understood as a responsibility, a tool for change. I nodded, remembering my own thoughts about literacy programs and scholarships. The question isn't what will you buy, but who will you become, Eleanor continued. Money doesn't change people so much as it reveals them. It removes constraints and masks. The person you truly are will be magnified by this kind of wealth. That's what scares me, I admitted. What if I become someone I don't recognize? Someone who's changed by all of it? Eleanor reached for her tea, her movements deliberate. Rebecca, I've known you for 16 years. I've watched you work multiple jobs while pursuing your education and your writing. I've seen you prioritize your students over your comfort, your values over convenience. Money may change your circumstances, but it won't change your character unless you allow it to. Her faith in me brought unexpected tears to my eyes. As for your family, she continued, that's more complicated. They've established a dynamic over decades, one where your sister is the golden child and you're the family disappointment. This money will disrupt that narrative entirely, and they won't know how to respond. What should I do? Should I tell them before it becomes public? What do you want from them, Rebecca? Financial support has never been your issue with your parents. What you've wanted, what every child wants, is to be seen, to be valued, for who you are rather than what you achieve. The question struck at the heart of my confusion. What did I want from my parents now? Their approval had been withheld for so long that I'd learned to live without it. Would their sudden interest and attention, prompted by my wealth rather than any actual change in me, mean anything? I think I want them to recognize that their measuring stick was flawed, I said slowly. That success isn't just about money or status or following their prescribed path. And do you believe this lottery win will convince them of that? Eleanor's tone was gentle but challenging. I thought about it honestly. No. If anything, it might reinforce their worldview. That worth is tied to wealth, that I'm suddenly more valuable as a person because I have money. Precisely. So the question becomes, knowing that, how do you want to proceed? What boundaries do you want to establish? What kind of relationship do you want with them moving forward? These were questions I'd never really considered before. I'd always accepted the relationship on their terms, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they offered. But now, everything was different. For the first time in my life, I had the power to set the terms. I don't want to cut them off, I said after consideration. But I don't want to be their ATM either. I want respect. And maybe some recognition that I've been building a meaningful life all along, even if it didn't look like what they wanted. For me, Eleanor nodded approvingly. That's a good start. Now, how will you communicate and enforce those boundaries? We spent the next hour talking through scenarios, how to handle direct requests for money, how to respond to sudden increased interest in my life, how to maintain my own values in the face of new pressures and expectations. Remember, Eleanor said as our conversation wound down, you get to write this story. Not your parents, not your sister, not the media that will inevitably sensationalize your win. You. And the first chapter doesn't have to be about the money at all. It can be about the woman who received it and the vision she has for her life. As I prepared to leave, Eleanor handed me a book from her shelf, a collection of essays about wealth, philanthropy, and finding purpose. Read the third essay first, she advised. It's about the difference between giving that empowers and giving that enables. You'll need to understand that distinction very clearly in the coming months. I hugged her tightly. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. Just promise me one thing, she said, her eyes serious. Don't let the money become your identity. You're Rebecca Chen, writer, teacher, compassionate soul. The millions are just a footnote to who you already are. I drove away from Lakeside with a clearer mind than I'd had since seeing those matching numbers on the lottery ticket. Eleanor was right. This wasn't just about what I would do with the money. It was about who I would be, what values would guide my decisions, what boundaries I would establish. Tonight's family dinner suddenly seemed like a perfect opportunity to practice. I wouldn't tell them about the lottery yet, but I could begin setting the stage for a new kind of relationship. One where I didn't automatically defer to their judgments or accept their dismissals. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. It was my mother. "Rebecca, can you pick up a bottle of that Pinot Noir the Hendersons liked last time? Your father forgot to get it, and you know how particular Richard Henderson is about his wine." In the past, I would have immediately agreed, rearranging my schedule and budget to accommodate the request. But Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. "You get to write this story." "I'm sorry, Mom, but I won't have time before dinner. I have other commitments this afternoon." It was such a small boundary, but my heart raced as I said it. There was a pause on the other end. "What commitments? Surely nothing that can't be rescheduled. This dinner is important, Rebecca." "My time is important too," I said, surprising myself with my calm tone. "I'll be there at 7, as agreed. But Dad will need to get the wine himself." Another pause. Longer this time. "Fine," my mother finally said, her voice tight. "I'll tell your father to stop on his way home." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, processing what had just happened. I'd said no to a simple request, and the world hadn't ended. My mother hadn't disowned me or launched into a lecture about my selfishness. She'd simply accepted it, however, reluctantly. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. I thought about what Eleanor had said, that money reveals who you truly are by removing constraints. Perhaps I was already beginning to discover who Rebecca Chen might be without the constraint of seeking parental approval that would never come. Tonight's dinner would be another test. And for the first time, I was looking forward to it, not with dread, but with curiosity about who I might become in this new chapter of my life. I arrived at my parents' house exactly on time, wearing a simple black dress I'd bought years ago for job interviews. It wasn't designer, but it was classic and well-made, one of the few items in my wardrobe that my mother couldn't easily criticize. As I walked up the brick pathway to their front door, I felt strangely calm. For the first time, I was entering this house with a secret that gave me power. Not just the lottery win itself, but the clarity Eleanor had helped me find. I wasn't here seeking approval or validation. I was here as an observer, studying, a dynamic I would soon disrupt entirely. My mother answered the door, already dressed in one of her expensive St. John knit suits, pearls gleaming at her throat. "Rebecca, good, you're on time." She glanced at my dress with mild surprise. "You look appropriate. Come in. The Hendersons are already here." The living room was arranged as it always was for these occasions. Furniture positioned for optimal conversation, fresh flowers in crystal vases, family photos prominently displayed. I noticed with a familiar twinge that most featured Olivia, her graduation, her award ceremonies, her professional headshot. The only photo of me was a group shot from a family vacation 5 years ago. Richard Henderson stood by the fireplace, talking with my father about golf handicaps and stock portfolios. His son, Jason, my supposed prospect, was checking his phone with barely concealed boredom. Olivia sat on the sofa, looking uncomfortable in a dress that was obviously new and expensive. "Rebecca!" Richard boomed when he saw me. "The teacher. How's that going? Still at it, are you?" "Still at it," I confirmed with a polite smile. "Admirable. Admirable. Not much money in teaching, of course, but someone's got to do it, eh?" He chuckled at his own wit. In the past, I would have smiled awkwardly and changed the subject, embarrassed by the implied criticism of my career choice. Tonight, I met his gaze steadily. Actually, I find it incredibly rewarding. Just last week, one of my struggling students finally grasped fractions after months of work. The look on his face when it clicked was worth more than any paycheck. Richard blinked, clearly not expecting a defense of my profession. "Well, yes, I suppose there are intangible benefits," My father jumped in quickly. Rebecca has always been idealistic. Olivia takes after me. Practical, business-minded. She just got 3 job offers, you know. Top firms all want her. And just like that, the conversation shifted back to Olivia's achievements. I caught my sister's eye across the room and was surprised to see something like apology in her expression. "Wine, Rebecca?" my mother asked, eager to move past my minor disruption of the usual script. "Just water, thanks. I'm driving." Jason finally looked up from his phone, assessing me with new interest. "You don't drink?" "I drink occasionally, just not tonight." "Shame. Dad brought some excellent Bordeaux, 40 years old. You probably wouldn't appreciate it anyway. It's about $400 a bottle." I smiled. "You're right. I probably wouldn't. My palate isn't sophisticated enough to justify spending a month's grocery budget on a single bottle of wine." The room went silent. My father cleared his throat nervously. My mother shot me a warning look. "I'm sure Rebecca was joking," she said with a tight laugh. "Dinner should be ready soon. Shall we move to the dining room?" As we took our seats, I found myself placed next to Jason, a not-so-subtle arrangement by my mother. He leaned toward me immediately. "So, teacher, huh? Must be tough making ends meet in Chicago on that salary." "It can be challenging," I acknowledged. "But I manage." "You could always marry into money," he suggested with a smirk that I supposed he thought was charming. "Save yourself the trouble of working so hard." In that moment, I saw him clearly, not just the arrogance and entitlement, but the profound emptiness behind it. Jason had never built anything himself, never struggled, never known the satisfaction of earning his own way. His life was defined by what his father had created, not by any achievement of his own. "I prefer to make my own way," I said. "But thank you for the outdated and mildly offensive suggestion." Olivia nearly choked on her water. My mother's face went pale. "Rebecca," she hissed, "apologize to Jason at once." I met her gaze calmly. "For what, exactly? Being honest?" My father jumped in. "Rebecca is just nervous. She doesn't get out much with her work schedule." He turned to Jason with an apologetic smile. "She's actually quite sweet once you get to know her." The pattern was so familiar. My parents rushing to smooth over any ripples I created, to explain away my behavior, to apologize for my failure to play my assigned role. But tonight, it didn't bother me as it usually did. I saw it for what it was: their discomfort with authenticity, their desperate need to maintain appearances. Throughout dinner, I observed the dynamics around me with new clarity. My parents fawning over the Hendersons, Olivia playing her part as the perfect daughter, though I noticed she seemed less enthusiastic than usual. Jason's condescending comments about regular people, and his father's boasting about their newest vacation property in Aspen. When dessert was served, an elaborate tiramisu my mother had spent hours preparing, Richard Henderson turned the conversation to his latest investment. "Technology is where the real money is now," he declared. "We just put $2 million into a startup that's going to revolutionize the education market, replacing teachers with AI, essentially." "How fascinating," my mother murmured. "Putting a lot of teachers out of work," I observed. "Progress is progress," Richard shrugged. "Those who can't adapt get left behind. That's just business." "Is it good business to devalue education by removing the human element? To turn learning into just another commodity?" I asked. Richard looked at me with surprise, as if he'd forgotten I could speak in complete sentences. "Well, the profit margins certainly suggest it is. Not everything that matters can be measured in profit margins, Mr. Henderson." My father looked like he might have a heart attack. My mother was shooting daggers at me with her eyes. But I felt incredibly free, no longer bound by their expectations or intimidated by people like the Hendersons, who measured worth only in dollars. After the Hendersons left, earlier than planned to my mother's distress, the storm broke. "What has gotten into you?" my mother demanded. Do you have any idea how important the Hendersons' connections could have been for this? Family? For your future? I'm not interested in connections that come with the price tag of pretending to be someone I'm not, I said calmly. This attitude of yours is exactly why you're struggling at 34, my father said. You reject good opportunities out of some misguided principle. I reject opportunities that require me to compromise my values, I corrected him. There's a difference. Values don't pay the bills, he snapped. Maybe not. But they let me sleep at night. Olivia, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke up. She's right, you know. All three of us turned to stare at her in shock. What did you say? Our mother asked. I said Rebecca's right. Olivia straightened her shoulders. The Hendersons are awful people. Jason is a misogynistic jerk who's never worked a day in his life, and his father treats people like commodities. My father's face flushed red. Olivia, you don't understand how the real world works. I understand perfectly, she interrupted. I've been playing this game my whole life. Being the perfect daughter, choosing the right career, dating the right men. And you know what? I'm exhausted. She turned to me. How do you do it, Becca? How do you stay true to yourself when it would be so much easier to just conform? Before I could answer, my mother cut in. This is ridiculous. Both of you are being dramatic. Rebecca, you've clearly been a bad influence on your sister. No, Mom, Olivia said firmly. Rebecca has been the only person who's ever been honest with me, and I'm finally ready to be honest too. I'm taking the job at Tech Vance, not Foster and Mills. I called them yesterday. The chaos that followed was almost comical. My parents, alternating between trying to reason with Olivia and blaming me for her sudden rebellion. Through it all, I maintained a calm that surprised even me. Their disapproval no longer had the power to wound me. As we prepared to leave, Olivia pulled me aside. I meant what I said in there. You've always been true to yourself, even when it cost you. I admire that more than you know. It's never too late to start living authentically, I told her. She hugged me, something she rarely did. Thanks for showing me it's possible. Driving home that night, I felt a shift within myself that had nothing to do with the millions waiting to be claimed. For the first time, I had stood in my parents' house, not as the disappointing daughter, but as a woman secure in her own worth. I had spoken my truth without apology. And somehow, unexpectedly, I had connected with my sister on a level I'd thought impossible. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. I finished the school year, saying goodbye to students who had no idea their substitute teacher was about to become a multimillionaire. I gave notice at the diner, telling Margot only that I had received an unexpected opportunity that would take me in a new direction. I signed countless documents with Michael, establishing trusts and foundations and security measures. And I found a house, not a mansion, but a beautiful Victorian in a quiet neighborhood with a garden in the back and plenty of room for bookshelves. I purchased it through one of the trusts Michael had set up, ensuring my name wouldn't be attached to the property records yet. 2 days before the Lottery Commission would announce my name publicly, I invited Eleanor to see the house. It's perfect. For you, she declared as I showed her around. Especially that room upstairs, ideal for a writing studio. That's exactly what I was thinking, I agreed. We sat in the garden, enjoying the late afternoon sun. Eleanor studied me over her teacup. You seem different, she observed. More centered. I feel different. Not because of the money, but because of the clarity it's brought. And your family? Have you decided how you'll handle that situation? I nodded. I'm telling them tomorrow, before the announcement. I want them to hear it from me, not the news. Wise decision. And what will you say? The truth. That I've won the lottery, that my life is changing, and that our relationship needs to change too. That I love them but won't allow them to use me or my resources to validate their worldview. Eleanor smiled approvingly. And if they react poorly? Then I'll give them time to adjust, but I won't compromise on my boundaries. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I'd called ahead, asking them to make sure Olivia would be there too, saying only that I had important news to share. They probably thought I'd finally been offered a permanent teaching position, the most success they could imagine for me. They were waiting in the living room when I arrived, a mix of curiosity and mild concern on their faces. "Rebecca, what's this about?" my father asked as soon as I sat down. "Your mother and I have a lunch engagement at the club in an hour." I took a deep breath. "I wanted you to hear this from me first, before it becomes public tomorrow. I've won the lottery, the $212 million jackpot from 3 weeks ago." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. My father stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Olivia was the first to recover. "Are you serious?" she whispered. I nodded. "I've spent the last few weeks working with attorneys and financial advisors to set everything up properly. After taxes and taking the lump sum, I'll receive about $90 million. $90 million, my father repeated, his voice faint. "Rebecca, sweetheart," my mother said, suddenly animated. "This is incredible news. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped you plan, advised you on investments." "I had all the help I needed," I said gently but firmly. "And I've already made my plans for the money." "What plans?" my father asked, a note of alarm in his voice. "I've established a foundation focused on literacy and education equity. I've set up trusts for my own financial security, and I've purchased a new home." "A home where?" my mother demanded. "Not in this neighborhood, surely. With your resources, you should be looking in Gold Coast or Lincoln Park." "My new home is perfect for my needs," I said. "But that's not why I'm here. I wanted to talk about how this change will affect our family dynamics." My father's expression shifted from shock to calculation. "Of course, we'll need to discuss how to best utilize this windfall for the family's benefit. I have some investment ideas that could—" "Dad," I interrupted gently, "this isn't a family windfall. It's mine. And while I'm happy to help in genuine emergencies, I won't be financing lifestyle upgrades or business ventures." His face flushed. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've set clear boundaries with my financial team about family gifts and loans. I'm saying that our relationship needs to be based on genuine connection, not financial expectations." My mother looked stricken. "You don't trust us? Your own parents?" "It's not about trust," I explained. "It's about establishing healthy patterns from the beginning. Too many lottery winners lose everything because they can't say no to family demands." "We're not making demands," my father argued. "But surely you understand that family helps family. When one succeeds, everyone benefits." I met his gaze steadily. Where was that philosophy when Olivia got her car? Her apartment? Her tuition paid in full? When has my success or struggle ever been treated as a family concern before? The room went silent again. Olivia looked down at her hands, uncomfortable but thoughtful. "That's completely different," my mother finally said. "We helped Olivia because she was following a path with real potential. You chose a career with limited prospects. I chose a career with meaning," I corrected her. "And now, through pure chance, I have the resources to create even more meaning, to help children learn to read, to support education in underserved communities, to finally pursue my writing seriously. That's what this money means to me. Not status, not revenge, just the freedom to live according to my values on a larger scale." My father stood up, anger replacing shock. "So, that's it? You get a windfall and suddenly you're too good for your family? You're going to punish us for pushing you toward a better life?" I remained calm. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm establishing boundaries I should have set years ago. I love you all, But I won't allow this money to become another way for you to measure my worth or to control my choices." Olivia looked up at me, something like admiration in her eyes. My mother was crying quietly. My father paced the room, alternating between anger and attempts at persuasion. I let them process, answering questions calmly, refusing to be baited into arguments or guilt-tripped into promises. After nearly an hour, I stood to leave. "Tomorrow my name will be in the news," I said. "Things will get chaotic for a while. I've purchased a new phone with a number I'll share only with family and close friends. My lawyers will handle any press inquiries." "And us?" my mother asked tearfully. "What about us?" "That depends on you," I said honestly. "I'm still Rebecca. I still care about this family, but the dynamics have to change. No more comparisons. No more treating me as less than because of my career choices or bank account. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on mutual respect." As I drove away from my parents' house for what I knew might be the last time in a long while, I felt not sadness but a profound sense of peace. The money hadn't changed who I was. It had simply given me the freedom to stand firmly in my truth. 3 months later, I sat in my new home office, looking out at the garden where autumn leaves were beginning to fall. On my desk sat a stack of manuscripts, my children's books, now being reviewed by a publishing house that had approached me after learning about my literacy foundation. My phone rang, my private number, known only to a select few. "Hello, Eleanor," I answered, recognizing her number. "Just checking in on my favorite philanthropist," she said. "How are things in the brave new world?" I smiled. Quieter now that the initial media frenzy has died down. The foundation launched its first 3 programs last week: free libraries in 5 underserved neighborhoods, a summer reading camp, and a scholarship fund for education students. "And your family?" It was a complicated question. My parents had cycled through anger, bargaining, and finally, a tentative acceptance of the new reality. We were speaking again, though cautiously. They had declined my invitation to the foundation launch event, still nursing wounded pride. Olivia, surprisingly, had become a more regular presence in my life. She'd taken the job at TechVance and seemed genuinely happier pursuing a path of her own choosing. She'd even volunteered to help with one of the foundation's reading programs. "We're finding our way," I told Eleanor. "Slowly." "Good. And you? Are you writing?" "Every day," I confirmed. "It turns out having financial security creates a lot more mental space for creativity." "That's what I've been telling struggling writers for decades," Eleanor laughed. After we hung up, I returned to the children's book I was currently working on. A story about a girl who discovers her own value isn't determined by other people's measuring sticks. The protagonist looked suspiciously like my childhood self, with unruly curly hair and glasses too big for her face. Outside, the gardener I'd hired was planting bulbs that would bloom in spring, daffodils and tulips that would transform the space with color and life, though I couldn't see evidence of them now. It was a fitting metaphor for my own transformation, I thought. The seeds had always been there, my values, my voice, my vision for a meaningful life. The lottery win hadn't created them. It had simply provided the right conditions for them to finally flourish and bloom. The millions in my bank account weren't the real windfall. The real prize was finding, at long last, the courage to be unapologetically myself, lottery winner or not. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.